Why is my electric bill higher than a nightclub's? That was the moment I knew something was off. I lived alone, no kids, no hot tub, no underground crypto rig, just me, a cat, and a modest solar-powered home in the suburbs. But then I saw it, an orange extension cord slithering from my outdoor outlet like a thief in daylight. I followed it around the fence, and there she was. Karen, lawn queen, HOA tyrant, sipping lemonade on my power. I didn't move to Northwood Hills for the nightlife. I moved for the silence, the kind of blessed quiet you only get when your neighbors are either retired or too scared of HOA bylaws to host a barbecue. My days were simple. Wake up, feed my tabby cat, Copernicus, harvest a few leaves of kale, maybe adjust the solar panel angle if the clouds were feeling dramatic. I'd been off grid, off drama, and off everybody's radar for nearly 2 years. That is, until my electric bill arrived and looked like it belonged to a Vegas light show. At first, I assumed it was a glitch. Maybe the power company was getting creative. Maybe they charged me for solar smugness. But no, when I opened the app, the numbers didn't just spike, they screamed. Now, I may be retired, but I didn't forget how to trace a problem. So I ran diagnostics. My appliances were efficient, my backup battery was stable, and Copernicus, last I checked, wasn't secretly running a hot tub in the garage. I was standing by the breaker box, scratching my head, when something caught my eye, just a flicker, a shimmer in the corner of the yard. I walked over, barefoot, because that's how I do battle with mystery, and there it was. An orange extension cord, not coiled, not tucked, just slithering out of my outdoor outlet like it paid rent. The cord vanished behind my side fence like a snake in hiding. I followed. What I saw next could have been a painting. There, reclining on a padded lawn chair like she was posing for a suburban Renaissance portrait, sat HOA Karen, the neighborhood's self-appointed queen of moral landscaping. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat that could block a solar eclipse and a floral robe that looked like it had never forgiven the 1,970s. In one hand, she held a mimosa. In the other, she was casually adjusting a plug, feeding power to a monstrosity of an industrial fan and a patio heater the size of a small rocket. The woman had built herself a backyard climate control system powered entirely by stolen sunshine. Mind you, I watched in silence because sometimes silence hits harder than yelling. She didn't even flinch. She sipped, smirked, and leaned back into the breeze my electricity was funding. There wasn't a hint of shame, not even that awkward neighborly wave people do when they know they've been caught. No, Karen radiated confidence. That's when I realized this wasn't some desperate one-time borrowing situation. This was an infrastructure-level crime of entitlement. And the kicker? She had decorated the patio with little signs that said, "Powered by nature." I almost applauded the audacity. As I stood there, processing the absurdity of it all, the bill, the fan, the mimosa, I had the sudden and unmistakable feeling that this wasn't going to end with a polite conversation or a returned extension cord. No, this was the beginning of something bigger. Because she wasn't just mooching a few watts. She wasn't borrowing electricity. She was declaring war with a smile and a smoothie. And buddy, she had just picked the wrong ex-engineer to mess with. Back when I first moved to Northwood Hills, I was warned about one thing. Don't make eye contact with Karen unless you're ready to explain your recycling habits. And for the longest time, I followed that rule. Karen wasn't just the HOA president. She was the self-anointed goddess of HOA law. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses like she was shielding her soul from unauthorized mailbox paint, and a gate that screamed, "I've cited people for less." One time, she fined a neighbor for playing a doorbell jingle that featured sleigh bells in April. Seasonal audio pollution, she called it. I figured if I stayed invisible and kept my grass 1/4 inch below the HOA's wrath line, I'd be safe. But this wasn't a wreath hanging too early or grass 2 shades off regulation green. This was my electricity funding her personal spa day. So I did what any former energy systems engineer would do. I stayed quiet and opened my breaker box. The smart panel blinked a warning. Something had been tripping the system intermittently, likely due to overdraw. I followed the wiring out to the infamous outlet she'd claimed as community-facing. And that's when it hit me. That outlet wasn't normal. It had been rerouted. Years ago, before I bought the place, the previous owner, a retired water systems guy, had reconfigured that outlet as part of an eco-friendly retrofit. See, most people think of septic systems as set it and forget it. Not this one. This one had a backup aeration pump wired to a pressure sensing control panel. In layman's terms, draw too much power and the system kicks into safety mode. In that mode, it involves venting excess pressure via a backflow failsafe. That failsafe just so happens to release through a small pipe that overflow drained right underneath the gravel patio Karen installed last year without so much as a permit or a warning. I had the survey maps to prove it. And just like that, a very stupid picture started forming. So I dug deeper, literally. I pulled out the blueprints, schematics, and utility records, sipping iced tea like I was planning a neighborhood barbecue instead of a data-driven Counter-Strike. The failsafe was designed to hold steady during minor spikes, but sustained overuse, like, say, running a jet fan and a patio heater for hours every afternoon, would eventually build pressure. Pressure the system would relieve exactly where Karen held her board and brunch HOA meetings on Sundays, with scones. I didn't design this system, but I sure as hell knew how to read it. Of course, I could have shut it down, cut the power, yelled over the fence. But that's not how you deal with Karen. Because Karen doesn't respond to logic, she responds to spectacle. And what she set in motion wasn't just a neighborly dispute. It was the perfect recipe for a dramatic lesson, one written not in bylaws, but in backslone. So while Karen strutted around with her sun hat and smoothie like some suburban Cleopatra, she had no idea what she was actually plugged into. Not a community outlet, not a shared amenity, but a fully functional septic-fed revenge engine with a 220-volt attitude. And that's when I realized Karen didn't just cross the line, she plugged herself into a time bomb made of sewage and karma. Now, I've always believed in passive solutions, solar power, composting, noise-canceling headphones for HOA meetings. So when faced with the ongoing daylight robbery happening via my outdoor outlet, I turned, naturally, to surveillance. Not some James Bond drone or laser grid. No, I went classic. A motion-activated trail camera, disguised perfectly inside a plastic lawn duck that had been sitting near my fence since last Easter. I'd named it Quackers. No one suspects a duck of espionage. For 3 days, Quackers delivered. Day 1, 1:14 p.m. Karen, in full athleisure glory, tiptoes across her lawn with a green smoothie and plugs in the cord like she's launching a rocket. She glances up, smiles at the camera, and waves. Clearly thought it was an HOA cam. Day 2, 12:58 p.m. Karen, now in a leopard print visor, does the same maneuver while yelling across the yard. Harold, we've got juice. Start the blender. Day 3, 1:02 p.m. Karen struts in wearing a tank top that says good vibes only, plugs in and begins what I can only describe as interpretive stretching to 90s pop music. All captured, all glorious. Meanwhile, I cross-checked my smart meter logs. Daily electrical spikes matched perfectly with her power hour. It was like clockwork. Fan on, heater humming, smoothie swirling. My system was screaming while she was sipping. And the funniest part? She still hadn't asked, not once. No text, no note, not even a knock with a muffin bribe. I was being exploited with the enthusiasm of a reality TV contestant looking for a hot tub. Then came the flyer. It showed up in my mailbox on a Wednesday, printed on glossy cardstock with a peachy orange gradient. Summer Glow Gala, it proclaimed. Music, margaritas, mocktails, and moonlight. Powered by our energy-efficient neighbor, Travis. I choked on my coffee. My name, my outlet, my power. I hadn't RSVP'd, but apparently I was now the featured sponsor. And that wasn't even the worst part. The flyer had my actual house in the background. She'd used a photo from a neighborhood picnic last year. I looked like an awkward solar panel wizard standing near my tomatoes. To make it even more absurd, the event boasted green energy support from our sustainable citizen, as if I had donated the wattage from my heart. Karen had basically turned me into a mascot. I walked out to the fence that evening, stared at the glowing string lights she'd started hanging, and muttered, "All right then." Because sometimes you don't argue with delusion. You let it throw its party, and then you control the lighting. So I checked the system again, made sure everything was still operating within range, and took a seat on my porch. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I had a pretty good idea. And if I was going to be the uninvited VIP at this gala, well, she used my name, my outlet, and my electricity. I didn't RSVP, but I sure planned the entertainment. I spent the next afternoon in my garage, not brooding like a villain, well, maybe just a little, but mostly running diagnostics. My septic system had a smart controller app I'd customized myself back in the days when I thought tinkering with wastewater tech was a relaxing hobby. It had three main states: idle, active, and emergency. Karen had unknowingly kept it hovering just below emergency for 3 days straight. So I opened the settings, raised the automatic cutoff threshold by 15%, and disabled the early warning shutdown. It wouldn't break anything, unless, of course, she pulled enough juice to run a backyard rave, which, judging by the flyer, was exactly what she had in mind. Then I added something special, a countdown, not for dramatic flair, okay, a little for dramatic flair, but to give me real-time updates when system pressure crept into the danger zone. 60 minutes. That's how long it would take with consistent overdraw for the system to hit release valve go boom territory. All I had to do was wait, monitor, and maybe make a batch of popcorn. Meanwhile, things on the HOA front were heating up, literally and figuratively. Karen had recruited a new board member. His name was Delton, but he insisted everyone call him Del, short for delightful. He wore pastel suits that looked like leftover Easter decorations and carried a gold clipboard he claimed was certified aesthetic. Apparently, he was now the self-appointed VP of neighborhood aesthetics, which I didn't even know was a position. He made it his mission to beautify the street, one citation at a time. That week, I got 2 violation notices taped to my mailbox, one for planting a lemon tree within 3.2 feet of the curb, and the other for sunlight glare from reflective wind patterns caused by my patio fan. Yes, wind glare. I would have framed them if they weren't so creatively absurd. But it was fine. Let them escalate. Every citation, every flyer, every pastel suit only made what was coming more justified. On Friday, Karen and her crew kicked off the setup for her Summer Glow Gala. Folding chairs, paper lanterns, tiki torches, though she swapped those for eco LED poles after last year's incident with the flaming squirrel. A DJ table appeared. A fog machine was wheeled in. My power outlet got a brand new splitter attachment. From the looks of it, she was about to recreate Coachella using nothing but suburban denial and stolen electricity. I updated the countdown settings, set my alerts, and positioned a second camera across from the outlet, just in case. Then I cleaned the porch rocker, chilled a pitcher of lemonade, and charged my phone. The calm before the storm had never looked so HOA certified. At one point, Dell walked by holding a roll of extension cords, like he was carrying the Olympic torch. "Big night tomorrow," he chirped, pointing at my outlet like it was a community vending machine. "We're really grateful for your contribution." I smiled, nodded, and said, "Happy to support green initiatives." He beamed. I nearly cracked a molar holding in the laugh. That night, as fairy lights flickered across Karen's lawn, I watched the wattage monitor tick upward. Slow, steady, hungry. I didn't need to do anything else. I didn't even need to show up. The system was already primed. She didn't know it yet, but every margarita she served brought her septic tank closer to mutiny. Saturday rolled in like a sitcom episode with a suspiciously high production budget. From my porch, I watched as guests arrived in droves, dressed like they were attending a vineyard wedding, not a backyard block party powered by Grand Theft Outlet. Karen had outdone herself. There were cocktail tables draped in white linen, a 3-tiered dessert stand, and even a guy with a man bun handing out organic popsicles. The speakers pumped out soft jazz at first, but I could see the fog machine warming up, ready to turn this HOA gathering into Studio 54 with rules about hedge height. By 2:04 p.m., everything was in motion, literally. The fans were blasting, the string lights were twinkling, and the blender was spinning like it was trying to achieve liftoff. My smart monitor lit up with activity. On my porch, I sipped lemonade and tapped open the app. Countdown, 56 minutes, right on schedule. I didn't feel malicious. I wasn't even smug. Okay, maybe a little smug, but mostly I felt curious. Curious what would happen when someone powered an eagle parade using a septic system, fail-safe as backup. Karen was glowing. Whether from the humidity or pure delusion was anyone's guess. She worked the crowd like a politician at a fundraiser, thanking everyone for coming, boasting about community, sustainability, and, of course, announcing that the event was graciously supported by our green energy neighbor, Travis. She even pointed at my porch. Guests clapped. I gave a two-finger salute and went back to my rocking chair. Counting down, 42 minutes. The guitarist played a jazzy rendition of Don't Stop Believin', while toddlers chased each other with glow sticks. Someone fired up the margarita machine. Karen snapped a selfie next to the electric fog machine and shouted, "This is what leadership looks like." I nearly spit my drink. Then the karaoke machine kicked in. The Sweet Carolina echoed across the lawn with the energy of three drunk aunts at a wedding. Counting down 27 minutes. The pressure readings were rising. Slowly but surely, the system was doing exactly what it had been designed to do: handle stress until it couldn't anymore. I knew the warning signs, the subtle ones, the low humming from the underground tank, the delayed reset from the relief valve, the little blip in the sensor app that said, in plain English, "Hey, buddy, we're getting close. Countdown, 8 minutes." I stood up, stretched my back, and walked closer to the fence, just in time to see Karen raise her microphone and yell, "Let's crank it up." She waved to Dell, the pastel-suited VP of Aesthetics, who flipped a switch. A bass drop hit. Fog billowed. The karaoke volume doubled. And then, as if summoned by karma itself, it began. A gurgle, a sputter, a deep burping groan from beneath one of the decorative tables. Guest paused mid-margarita. The tablecloth lifted ever so slightly. And then, splash, a burst of gray-brown water shot up like a foul fountain, spraying quiche, wine glasses, and Karen's monogrammed napkins. Screams followed. People scrambled. A second burst geysered across the lawn, soaking the dessert stand and knocking the guitarist's amp off its crate. The smell hit next like hot garbage doing yoga in a sewer. Karen froze, mic still in hand. "Oh, my HOA," she shrieked just before slipping on the now toxic puddle and landing with a wet thud. The mic let out a feedback squeal that could have shattered HOA bylaws. Kids cried. Guests gagged. The fog machine kept running, now mixing with septic mist in what I can only describe as an unholy weather pattern. The guitarist bolted. Someone yelled, "It's in my shoe." Karen flailed in the puddle, one hand gripping her clipboard like it was a flotation device. And I sat back down on my porch, took another sip of lemonade, and smiled like a man who understood that revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it bubbles up quietly until it explodes in the middle of your enemy's garden gala. You think that was the end? No, Karen was just getting warmed up, figuratively and, unfortunately, physically. The day after the gala became a septic-themed disaster movie, I figured Karen would lie low, maybe nurse her wounds, hose off her patio, reflect on her life choices. Nope. Instead, I woke up to a bright orange violation notice taped to my door, listing a $6,000 0 cents fine for creating an unregulated biohazard impacting HOA enjoyment zones. I had to read it twice just to make sure it wasn't satire. According to the document, I had weaponized private plumbing to inflict reputational damage. I guess that's one way to interpret physics. An hour later, I got a knock at the door from two very polite city inspectors. They had received an anonymous tip about an unauthorized chemical laboratory operating under residential cover. I didn't even ask who sent it. The report mentioned pipes, pressure readings, and the phrase intentional environmental sabotage. They were clearly expecting a meth lab. What they found instead was a tidy solar-powered home, a very grumpy cat named Copernicus, and a man holding a binder thicker than a wedding album. I walked them through everything. Permits? Check. County-approved septic schematic? Yep. Maintenance logs, sensor reports, water usage charts, even the original email from the engineer who installed the overflow line. And then, just for fun, I pulled out my laptop and played the footage. Karen plugging in her extension cord 3 days in a row, smiling like she just got a new yacht. The inspectors exchanged looks. One of them said, "Yeah, we're definitely going to file this under not your fault." But Karen wasn't done. Flyers started appearing in everyone's mailboxes. Bold red font. Block letters. Title, "The Septic Menace." Stop Travis before he flushes again. The flyer accused me of gross negligence, public endangerment, and being an unhinged homeowner obsessed with waste-based domination. There was even a blurry photo of my backyard taken through the fence with a red circle around my septic control panel. It looked like a movie poster for a plumbing horror film. And yet something amazing started happening. Neighbors, real ones, not just HOA loyalists, began pushing back. One uploaded footage from the gala to the Northwood Hills Facebook group. It showed Karen dancing, laughing, and pointing directly at my outlet, saying, "Thanks, Travis," before the sewage wave hit. Comments exploded. Wait, wasn't she using his electricity? I thought Travis was off grid. You know, isn't that illegal? Then came the video reposts. Another neighbor uploaded a time lapse of Karen plugging in cords on different days. Someone else shared a screenshot of the HOA bylaws that clearly stated, "No unauthorized access to private utility systems shall be permitted." Dell, the pastel suit prince of aesthetics, even tried defending her online until someone dug up a photo of him posing in front of her margarita machine with the outlet cord clearly in the background. The story was unraveling, not just in public, but in Karen's carefully constructed kingdom of rules and roses. She had spent years controlling the narrative, policing wreath colors, mailbox tilts, even the angle of lawn flamingos. But now her empire was crumbling under the weight of her own nonsense. And while I kept watering my kale and sipping lemonade, her flyers were being used to line bird cages and wrap garbage bins. Because if there's one thing suburban America loves more than a scandal, it's a scandal caught on camera. Karen tried to rewrite history, but unfortunately for her, the footage was in 4K. A week after the gala implosion, a manila envelope arrived from the county's Environmental Compliance Division. Inside, official notice of an active investigation. Apparently, the mysterious sewage tsunami hadn't just wrecked Karen's koi pond. It had overflowed into a nearby protected runoff area. The environmental impact report included phrases like biological intrusion, soil contamination, and my personal favorite, unapproved waterway rerouting adjacent to an unauthorized patio expansion. In plain English, Karen's unpermitted landscaping project had turned a butterfly garden buffer zone into a toxic slip slide. The county was not amused. They scheduled an emergency HOA hearing and made it public, mandating all residents be notified. Flyers went out, this time not from Karen, but from the city. The meeting was held in the community hall, and for the first time in HOA history, every seat was full. Some people even brought popcorn. I wore a flannel and brought my binder. Karen wore her signature red blazer and brought attitude. She stepped to the podium like a reality show contestant at the final elimination. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we've all been misled by misinformation and manipulated footage." She gestured toward me. "This individual has conducted a long-term campaign to destabilize our community. His system is dangerous, his intentions are malicious, and his behavior, frankly, borderline psychotic." The county official nodded politely, then said, "Let's review the footage." Cue the video. Karen plugging in, Karen waving at the camera, Karen yelling, "Harold, turn on the blender." The room went silent, then gasped, then a voice. Mrs. Dempsey, 74 from Lot 16, stood up and shouted, "You told us that was a butterfly sanctuary." The floodgates opened. One neighbor demanded to know where their HOA fees had gone. Another asked why the bylaws had been rewritten without a vote. Someone in the back held up a flyer and said, "Is this what you mean by sustainability?" Karen stammered, sputtered, and finally tried to pivot. "Well, the county lost my paperwork and the footage may have been edited." That's when the county rep dropped the real bombshell. Karen was facing an environmental fine up to $250,000, 0 cents, for illegal drainage modification and pollution of a protected wetland. The HOA would be audited, and if negligence or fund misuse was found, she could be held personally liable. Karen blinked like someone just unplugged her brain. Her mouth moved, but no sound came out. The meeting ended in shouting. A motion to remove her as president was filed, and the HOA board nearly collapsed on the spot. But my part wasn't done. The next week, I had my day in court. Karen showed up with a new lawyer and a noticeably deflated aura. I had brought my documentation, video evidence, and a little flash drive labeled, "Just press play." The judge took one look at the video and the HOA bylaws and asked, "Did you plug in a device on someone else's property without permission?" Karen muttered something about community sharing. The judge nodded once, then banged the gavel. I was awarded full damages, attorney fees, and a public letter of apology from the HOA. But there was one more twist. Due to my background in civil infrastructure and the utter collapse of the HOA's internal structure, the judge suggested I be appointed as infrastructure and compliance advisor for the neighborhood. It wasn't exactly on my bucket list, but when justice offers you the blueprint, sometimes you pick up the pen. Karen lost the board, the lawsuit, and the last shred of HOA power she ever held. But the final thing, that was personal. The first thing I did after the court ruling wasn't throw a party or frame the apology letter, though I'll admit both crossed my mind. No, I walked straight to the infamous outlet, installed a reinforced weatherproof lockbox around it, and slapped on a freshly printed label that read, "Okay, touch and you'll meet the skunk cannon." Now, I didn't actually own a skunk cannon, but the thing about suburban threats is if they sound just crazy enough, no one questions them. That outlet had seen things. It deserved a second life as a warning sign. Meanwhile, the HOA went through what can only be described as a spiritual cleanse. After Karen's dramatic exit from power, complete with blazer flapping in the wind like a fallen flag, the board finally voted on a full overhaul. I attended the first restructured meeting, this time as the official infrastructure and compliance advisor. We passed something I proudly called the Karen provision, a new bylaw that banned unauthorized access to private property, mandated transparent financial audits, and this was important, required any HOA fine to be accompanied by an actual written rule. Radical, I know. Karen didn't protest. She didn't post angry flyers. She didn't show up with new pastel-suited allies. She just disappeared. Her yard grew wild, her porch lights stayed off, and then one morning, a "for sale by owner" sign popped up, leaning slightly to the left like it had already given up. A week later, a U-Haul backed into her driveway. Her husband packed. She was nowhere in sight. The new owners were a couple in their early 30s. Nice people. He wore flannel. She brought over cookies. They introduced themselves as Sam and Rachel, expecting their first child. We chatted over the fence while I watered my kale. Sam pointed to the lockbox and asked, "Hey, what's that for?" I smiled. "Just a reminder of how not to make friends with your neighbors." He laughed, nodded, and promised to keep his cords to himself. That evening, I sat on my porch with Copernicus curled beside me, a glass of iced tea in hand, and the scent of barbecue drifting faintly from down the block. Kids rode scooters past the fence. Someone was tuning a guitar, not for karaoke, thankfully. The neighborhood felt peaceful, not just quiet, but genuinely at ease, like a chapter had closed. I glanced over at the outlet, now locked, sealed, and respected. It wasn't just a power source anymore. It was a monument to boundaries, to patience, and to one absurdly electrifying battle of wills. Some folks fight with fists, others with words. I fought with wiring diagrams and a septic system. If this whole septic saga taught me anything, it's this: boundaries matter. Whether it's personal space, property lines, or literally an electrical outlet. Respect isn't about clipboards or bylaws. It's about not stealing your neighbor's electrons to power a margarita blender. Sometimes you don't need to shout, fight, or fire back. Sometimes all it takes is patience, a little planning, and a septic tank with a solid sense of timing. So, yeah, don't mess with introverts who know how to code. If you've ever dealt with a Karen, a rogue HOA, or just someone who thinks your yard is their playground, drop your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if you enjoyed this wild ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with that one friend who definitely owns a hidden camera in their lawn. Catch you next episode.